Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear the words "ado or die," what comes to your mind? A battlefield? A desperate mission? A final attempt before surrender? But this is not about killing the body. It is about dissolving what limits life within us. Do or die is not a slogan of despair. It is a call to live totally intensely, uncompromisingly. The problem with most human beings is not that they don't have enough time. It's that they live as if they are not going to die. So everything is postponed, love is postponed, courage is postponed, dreams are postponed. As if life is a rehearsal. Do or die is not about doing something reckless, it's about doing something absolute. It means I'm all in, no safety net, no looking back. Because unless something is worth dying for, it's not really worth doing. People ask, what if I fail? Failure is not the issue. The real question is, did you burn completely or not? Even if you fall like a flame, the world will still light up for a moment. That's enough. Look around. Life is not waiting for you. Trees are growing, rivers are flowing, the sun rises even if you are depressed. So the choice is simple. Either be a part of this life completely or slowly die without ever living. That's what do or die means. You don't need to climb Everest or fight wars. Just sit silently for 10 minutes and see how many things inside you are holding you back. Your opinions, your fears, your past, these are the things that must die. If you let these go, then doing becomes effortless. Life itself becomes meditation. So I say let comfort die, let fear die, let laziness die, let ego die. When you say intense commitment, it does not mean a moment of enthusiasm or a burst of inspiration or a phase of motivation that comes and goes like the wind through an open window. It means becoming so soaked in what you're doing, so dissolved in the process, that the difference between you and the action disappears, so that your very breath aligns with your intention and life no longer feels like something you are managing but something you are merging with until every cell of your body is involved. And there is no longer a who doing it, there is just doing. Most people think commitment is about sticking to something when it is convenient or favorable. But the true test is when nothing outside supports it, no applause, no reward. No visible progress. Yet you remain like a mountain that does not move when the wind howls. Like the sun that rises even if no one praises its light, because intense commitment is not dependent on result or recognition. It is simply the natural fragrance of one who has given themselves fully. Not partially, not cautiously, but entirely. This kind of commitment cannot be manufactured. It arises when something matters to you more than your personal comfort, more than your convenience, more than the opinions of those around you. And when you're longing for that, becomes deeper than your fear of failure or pain or fatigue or judgment, then you no longer need to push yourself because the fire within is enough to carry you forward without any external encouragement. Intense commitment is not loud, it does not always scream with ambition or display itself in obvious ways. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like patience, like getting up one more time. Even the legs don't feel like moving. Like holding on to your truth when everyone around you has abandoned theirs. And it is in these quiet, invisible moments that the real work happens, not the show, not the drama, but the silent burning that transforms you without asking permission. To be intensely committed is to understand that there is no other way, no second option, no back door, because when the mind knows there is an escape route, it will always take it in times of discomfort. But when you seal every exit and tell yourself, this is… then a different energy arises in you, a different clarity, a different ferocity. Not the violence of anger, but the intensity of purpose. And suddenly the impossible begins to bend before your will, not because it is easy, but because you have become unstoppable. This is not obsession, it is sacred responsibility, the recognition that you have been entrusted with something, mission. And it is not yours to drop or delay or dilute, it is something that passed through the cosmos and landed in your hand. And once you see it like that, it is no longer about success or failure, it becomes about honoring what has been given to you, doing justice to the chance, standing up to the challenge with the entirety of who you are. Such commitment will demand everything from you. It will take your time, your tears, your habits, your illusions, and in return, it will give you something that cannot be bought or taught. The taste of wholeness, the joy of knowing you did not hold back. That you lived in such a way that even if you fall like lightning, burning bright for one brief moment that is enough to change the night around you. And in the end, when you look back, it won't be the outcomes that matter, not the trophies, not the titles, but the simple knowing that you went all in, that you did not dilute your devotion, that you walked the fire willingly and found out what you're truly made of. And in that knowing, there is a freedom that no achievement can offer, a fulfillment that comes only to those who have dared to live with intense commitment. To drop the fear of failure is not to become reckless or blind to consequences, but to see clearly that failure is not the real enemy, that it is merely a mirror reflecting the boundaries of your current capability. And when you stop mistaking this mirror for a wall, when you stop shrinking away at the first sign of discomfort, then something within you begins to uncoil, begins to stretch beyond inherited limitations, and the chains of imagined judgment start to fall one by one. Not because the world becomes kinder, but because you no longer give it the power to decide who you are. Fear of failure is not born from reality, it is born from memory and imagination. What happened before, what could happen again, what people might say, how it might hurt, yet none of this is happening now. And still you suffer as if it already has. And this is the madness of the mind that constantly feeds you worst-case stories and disguises them as wisdom. But once you begin to see this not as protection but as paralysis, then a new intelligence wakes up in you. An intelligence that would rather fall 100 times than stay frozen one moment. People fear failure not because they love success so much, but because they have tied their self-worth to outcomes. So if their work fails, they think they are the failure. If the plan collapses, they think they have collapsed. And this is where the poison begins, not in failing, but in identifying so deeply with what you do that you are, and to untangle yourself from that knot is the real liberation. Because when you finally realize that your essence is untouched by result, then your actions become fearless, playful and alive again. The fear of failure also comes from comparison, from constantly looking sideways at who is ahead and who is behind, like a runner who forgets the finish line and keeps twisting their neck to see who is chasing. And in that distraction, they stumble not because they are weak, but because they are not present. So if you can bring your energy inward, if you can focus not on who is watching but on what is needed, then every act becomes a meditation, every attempt becomes sacred. And whether it leads to triumph or collapse, you remain untouched in the core of your being. You must understand failure is not final unless you decide to stop. It is not a verdict, it is a bend in the road, a crack that reveals the next layer of growth. And those who have done anything worthwhile have always faced it, not once or twice, but again and again, not as punishment, but as process. Oh, because life does not test you to break you, it tests you to shape you, to see if your longing is real or just entertainment. And only those who stay when the ground shakes are gifted the deepest strength that cannot be stolen. To drop this fear, you must be willing to lose something, not your life, but your comfort, your image, your certainty. And this is why many never begin, because they are so busy protecting what they already know that they never discover what more they can become. But if you can surrender this illusion of control and step anyway into the unknown, you will see that what falls away was never you, and what remains is unshakable. This fearlessness is not arrogance, it is humility at its highest form, because it means you have accepted your humanity, your imperfection, your vulnerability, and yet you move, not in denial of risk, but in celebration of possibility. And this dance with the unknown is what makes life real. Because if everything were guaranteed, there would be no growth, no depth, no meaning, only repetition. And to live like that is to die without dying. So I say, don't wait to be fearless before you act. Act and fear will lose its grease. Not because it disappears overnight, but because you stop bowing to it. And the more you walk with trembling legs, the steadier you become, until one day you realize that failure was never something to fear, but a teacher that walked with you in disguise, helping you burn away everything false, until only the truth of who you are remain. To transcend limitations is not about fighting what holds you back, but about seeing clearly that most of what you call limitation is not in the world, not in your body, not in your circumstances, but in the stories you keep repeating inside your head. The boundary is drawn not by reality, but by belief. And once you begin to notice that the prison is made of your own thoughts, not of iron bars or external walls, then a new kind of freedom arises, not loud, not dramatic, but a quiet unraveling of everything that seemed impossible just a moment before. Limitation is not the problem. Attachment to limitation is the problem, because somewhere along the way you began to find identity in your struggle, began to see safety in your excuses, began to build a nest inside, known and call it truth. And so even life offers you a ladder to rise, you hesitate not because the path is blocked, but because your comfort is stronger than your longing. And until the longing becomes a burning, a fire that refuses to be contained, the walls will remain. not because they are unbreakable, but because you choose to stay behind them. To go beyond yourself does not require a miracle. It requires presence, absolute willingness, and the courage to confront the small voices that say, are not you, are not now, are not yet, and these voices do not come from your soul. They come from years of conditioning, of being told to be realistic, to be careful to fit in. And transcending them is not rebellion for the sake of drama. It is simply choosing truth over habit, choosing expansion over repetition, choosing the sky even if you've only known the ground. The real limitations are subtle, they don't scream at you. They whisper through fatigue, through hesitation, through the comfort of routine. And that is why many never see them as chains. There's normal. But to live just because you are alive is not living. And to wake up each day within the same mental walls is not consciousness. So to transcend is to begin. Not with the outer climb, but with the inner shift where you decide that just surviving is no longer enough. You may think you need more strength, more knowledge, more time, but often what you need is less, a little less fear, a little less doubt, a little less clinging to who you think you are. And once these layers begin to fall, you will find that what remains is already vast, already capable, already connected to something beyond personal identity. And this connection is not poetic, it is practical. Because the moment you stop contracting in fear, life begins to move through you in ways the mind cannot plan. Transcending limitations does not mean you will never fall, never break, never doubt again. It means that each time you do, you rise a little faster, you fall a little lighter. Because something in you has stopped identifying with the fall, something in you knows now that pain is not punishment, that difficulty is not destiny, that even the greatest walls begin to crumble when your stillness becomes stronger than your resistance. There will be voices around you that try to define your limits, well-meaning voices, familiar voices, even loving voices. But only you can decide what is true for you. And if you do not listen to the deeper pulse within, the one that keeps saying there's more, I go further, or don't stop here, then no amount of encouragement from others will set you free. But if you do listen, if you learn to walk even when the path is invisible, then you will find that what you once called your limit was only the edge of your old self waiting to be left behind. So when we speak of transcending limitations, we are not speaking of climbing mountains or winning races or collecting achievements. We are speaking of shedding the old skin, the old stories, the smallness that never belonged to you in the first place. And when this shedding happens not once but again and again as a way of living, then even the sky is no longer the limit because you have stopped being a person trying to rise and become the rising itself. Spiritual urgency is not about rushing or running or doing more rituals faster. It is about recognizing that this life, this breath, this moment is not guaranteed, not owned, not on repeat. And when you truly see that your time here is not a forever contract but a fleeting mystery, then something stirs deep inside. Not panic, not fear, but an intense longing to touch the essence of life before it slips away unnoticed through the cracks of daily distractions and unconscious repetition. Most people think they have time, they plan their inner growth for some day, after the job is secure, after the family is settled, after the body is healed, after retirement. But life is not waiting for the calendar to open. And spiritual urgency is that burning awareness that the only time to wake up now, that the soul does not belong to the future, and postponing truth is the most dangerous form of sleep because it feels comfortable while it quietly steals your depth. This urgency does not come from outside pressure, it rises from within, like a silent scream that grows louder each time you ignore it. A sacred ache that reminds you that no amount of external success can fill the inner gap, that no new possession, title, or praise can give you what even one moment of clarity can offer. And once this longing takes hold of you, you can no longer live half asleep, you can no longer pretend that surface living is enough, and the hunger for something real becomes unavoidable. Spiritual urgency is not about abandoning the world, but about engaging with it more consciously, more fully. Because once you realize that every encounter, every emotion, every breath is a doorway to either awakening or unconsciousness, you stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop seeking sacredness only in silence, and you begin to bring your awareness into the ordinary, turning the mundane into meditation, the pain into purification, the joy into prayer. To feel this urgency is to walk through life like a flame, burning with purpose, not aggression, not ambition, but a quiet intensity that refuses to be numb, refuses to be distracted, refuses to go through the motions just because everyone else is. And this flame does not consume you, It reveals you. It burns away everything false so that what is real can stand without decoration or defense, just as it is, naked and alive and free. Without spiritual urgency, even the most profound truths become entertainment, the deepest teachings become theories, the most sacred practices become routines, and slowly you begin to confuse familiarity with wisdom, but urgency keeps your inner space fresh. It keeps the fire alive. It keeps you from turning spirituality into comfort instead of transformation. Because the purpose of the path is not to relax you into sleep, but to shake you into wakefulness. You do not need to renounce the world or retreat into caves to feel this urgency. You only need to remember that death is not a distant shadow, it walks beside you always. Not to threaten you, but to remind you to live now, love now, see now, be now, because when the breath is taken away, it is not your bank balance or your followers or your opinions that will matter, but whether you use this one fragile life to come closer to truth, to light, to what you truly are beyond the name and the form. So let this urgency not make you anxious but alert, not restless but ready, not panicked but profoundly present, because once you see clearly that the clock is always ticking, not to scare you but to awaken you, then every moment becomes sacred, every step becomes intentional, and your entire life begins to move, not in reaction but in reverence. As a response to the quiet whisper of eternity echoing through chambers of your temporary time on ear. An inner revolution is not something that announces itself with noise or banners or breaking news. It begins quietly, sometimes even painfully, like a small cracking deep within the psyche where your old patterns begin to falter. Where the roles you've been performing start to feel too tight for the vastness you sense inside. And it is in that moment, not of inspiration but of discomfort, that a shift begins, not because you planned it, but because the truth within you has grown tired of waiting. This revolution is not about changing the world outside, not first, not yet, because unless you dismantle the structures that dominate you from within, the wounds you kept dressing as personality, any change outside will only be a rearrangement of the same illusion. And so the inner revolution is a tearing down of false walls you didn't even know you built, a fire that does not destroy but purifies until only what's essential is left standing. Most people think revolution means fighting something, but the real revolution is when you stop fighting yourself. When you stop negotiating with your own potential, when you stop making excuses for why you cannot be free, and that moment when you look at your own mind and say, enough, not with anger but with clarity, not with blame but with responsibility, that is the moment a new intelligence is born, not borrowed, not read, not taught but awakened. This revolution is silent but not passive, inward but not invisible, because as you begin to watch your thoughts instead of obeying them, to feel your emotions without drowning in them, to question your reactions rather than justify them, you start to see that most of your life has been lived by habit and heritage, and the moment you realize this, you are no longer a puppet to your past, you are a participant in your becoming. The inner revolution is not comfortable because transformation is not cosmetic, it is radical, it is dismantling. It is the death of who you thought you were so that the birth of who you truly are can take place, and this is not metaphorical. It feels like dying. Because the ego does not surrender gracefully. It resists, it bargains, it screams. But if you remain steady, if you let the storm pass through without flinching, you will find on the other side a presence that was never disturbed. You cannot schedule an inner revolution like a meeting or manifest it through wishful thinking. It requires brutal honesty and tender courage, the ability to sit in your own silence without flinching, to see your own shadows without decorating them. And instead of polishing the mask, you begin to peel it layer by layer until the face behind the face begins to breathe, begins to live, begins to guide you in a language that needs no words. People may not understand what is happening to you. They may say you've changed, they may feel uncomfortable because when one person wakes up, it disturbs the dream of others. But remember, this path is not about comfort, it is about clarity, not about being liked, but about being true. And the more you honor that revolution within, the more your life begins to align. Not perfectly, not always easily, but with a sense of rightness that no external approval can offer. So let the inner revolution come like a storm. Let it shake you from within. Let it turn your illusions to dust and your pretenses to ash, because only when the inner world is reordered, realigned, reborn, can the outer life begin to reflect peace, not as performance but as presence, not as effort but as essence. And in that still burning center, you will know there is nothing more to fix, only more to feel, more to awaken, more to become.